Joining me now to talk about it is political analyst Jake Curtis, who is the chief counsel for the Institute for Reforming Government as well. Good morning, sir. How are you?
We've had better mornings, haven't we, Jake?
Yeah, yes, we have. It's safe to say we on the right were shocked and surprised by Susan Crawford's rather easy 10-point margin of victory. I'm certain the Democrats were too. What's your best explanation for what happened here?
Well, I think two things. And first, I would completely agree. I think Brad Schimel ran hard. I think he was a good candidate. I don't like when people immediately pile on and, right away run to this narrative that the candidate was horrible or the campaign was horrible. He ran hard. He worked his tail off.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good judge. He was a good attorney general. Look, there's some fundamental things happening in Wisconsin right now. You and I were talking off air. You have 63% of Wisconsinites who support a conservative reform. And we can go back, right? We had, 70% that support citizen-only voting. So when you put conservative policies in front of Wisconsinites, not all of them, but certain ones that are just a straight question to the electorate, they overwhelmingly pass. And yet we have a situation like we have had yesterday where you had a good candidate lose by 10 points. There's a fundamental disconnect right now between the campaigns that we're running and the issues that people care about in the electorate. There's a disconnect, and somebody needs to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. We talked briefly midday yesterday, and the massive and unexpected level of turnout yesterday had Republicans around the state very encouraged. We were thinking Schimel can win this. My take is turnout spiked in the red areas where Schimel needed it to, yes, but the people going to the polls split their votes far more evenly between the two than anyone expected. What do you think we should attribute that to? I mean, do you point to an abortion? Do you point to an issue, or do you just point to this current situation?
Yeah, I think that's all right. Interestingly, I know you and I talked on air after the debate, and there was an interesting moment where up to the debate, a lot of the focus and attention had been on Musk. And then during that debate, we actually tracked it. The first 13 minutes of the debate, Crawford exclusively talked about abortion. So then we thought, okay, maybe she's going to be really changing her messaging. And certainly abortion was part of her messaging the last few weeks, but it kind of flipped back to all about Musk. And I think we had this weird dichotomy where if you're Schimel, obviously, legally he can't coordinate, but he certainly could have tried to distance himself from Musk. And he didn't. And I don't blame him for that, right? Musk came in with obviously substantial funding, which he needed to offset the Soros and Pritzker and other progressive money that went to Crawford. Well, in doing so, the campaign kind of was feeding into the narrative that Crawford was embracing. And clearly a lot of Wisconsinites didn't appreciate his role. And again, I'm not criticizing the campaign because we needed to somehow offset the millions of dollars that were coming in from California, New York, and Illinois. But it was just kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy that this became a referendum on Musk, even more so than Trump.
Yeah. One of the things I wonder is, would any Wisconsin-centric or strategy related to a court race have actually worked here, given how quickly it was nationalized as a referendum on Trump and Musk? Was Brad Schimel at some point so swamped under by national Democrat fundraising that he really had no choice other than to ask for Musk and Trump's help and hope for the best?
I think that's right from a high-level standpoint, right? From the strategic standpoint, it's all this out-of-state money from progressive billionaires was going to flow into the state. We have to somehow counteract that. But I think there's some risk there to say, well, this was just going to be a referendum on Musk, and so we needed Musk's, millions of dollars to offset that. I think it's kind of glossing over a more fundamental problem of how we're running really all statewide races, but judicial races in particular. But, we're reforming government. I know it's cheesy, but we talk about kitchen table issues because that's the issues people care about. And I'm starting to wonder, and I think the powers that be in Madison and the consultant class, and I don't, it's fine. People need consultants. I get that. But they're running the same playbook that we've been running for the last 15 years. It's not working. And so I think we need to have like a fundamental analysis of what are the issues that Wisconsinites care about. We have these judicial races where it turns into a tennis match between he's soft on crime, she's soft on crime. He had this bad sentence, she had this bad sentence. The average Wisconsinite, that's not moving them.
Yeah.
They care about school choice. They care about, what is Act 10 going to do to property taxes? They care about religious liberty. Those were not the issues that either candidate was running on. We've put out a lot of op-eds through reforming government over the last 3 months. The one that resonated the most was the one, and I know you and I talked about this, Jay, was the one that Matt Batesville and I did in the Federalist on homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
How Susan Crawford's husband wrote a book about how to kill homeschooling. It's because there are 30,000 kids in the state that homeschool their kids. You talk about school choice. There's 130,000 kids that go to private school. A significant percentage of them at this point are, benefit from school choice. These are the issues people care about. And so,
that everyone who voted for Susan Crawford is going to be shocked when their property taxes go up by $1,000 pretty quickly if they kill off Act 10. I mean, I and others argued that Schimmel's campaign and these third-party groups should have made this about the loss of Act 10, school choice, all the other Walker-era reforms that are now under threat. And we were told, no. The, law and order issues move voters in judicial races like this. And as you say, it's kind of the same script and the same playbook. I thought that there'd be more of a shift. When Janet Protasewicz's strategy proved, okay, voters are just going to see this as a political race anyway. Let's just politicize the hell out of it, as she did and won by 11 points. I thought we'd see more of that on our side of the aisle. All right, well, I guess we're just politicizing these things now. But instead, Brad Schimmel, I think to his credit, did try to stick with this, look, this should be about the judicial campaign and law and order, but the left wasn't worried about that.
Well, I think that's right, Jay, but it's not. I guess my nuance to that would be you don't necessarily have to run it about as a political campaign about these are the policy priorities. It's about these are the policy priorities that the legislature and the governor have rightfully passed over the last 10, 15 years, the Walker-era reforms. Is it the job of the court to simply instill their values, the progressive values, and overturn all these important policy reforms? So it's still about the judiciary. Yeah. You don't need to make it a campaign for governor. You're running for the high court. So what does that mean? You're ruling on issues that unless it's clearly unconstitutional, Act 10 is the law of the land. I'm not going to instill my values. I mean, that's the message I think people want.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I believe the relentless $70 or $80 million smear campaign against Brad Schimmel worked as well. I mean, from the very start, the very first ads Crawford ran were lies and smears mischaracterizing him and his record, and voters were bombarded with them for 3 months. Money does matter, and Democrats have always known this, and despite the fact that they wanted to focus on Elon Musk's contributions here, aren't the final numbers going to show that that Schimmel was outspent, by 2 to 1, basically?
I don't know, Jay. I mean, I think you had J.R. Ross on this morning, or you're going to. Yeah. According to his latest tweet, there was $107 million spent in the race. Total $58 million in support of Schimmel. So I'm not sure, which is even more damning, right? I'm not sure we lost the money war. This comes down to the issues the candidates are running on.
Well, I know, Phil, you watch Madison closely. I now fully expect the current version of the Supreme Court, even before Crawford is sworn in August, to kill off Act 10. Don't you think Act 10 is dead, or at least a good chunk of it?
Right. It's sitting in District 2, the Court of Appeals, which is based in Waukesha. There's a good chance they overturned the Frost decision, which was a Dane County judge's decision that overturned Act 10, but that obviously will be appealed. And they've made a unique equal protection claim under the Wisconsin Constitution. And so I would say there's a very good chance this now cemented progressive majority is going to overturn Act 10. And so all the numbers that, Will and McIver and IRG have been referencing as the savings, right? That obviously gets overturned, and those are no longer savings. Those are now either tax increases or, as we pointed out, because of the property tax, because of the levy limits, there's a good chance you have significant cuts to services, and ironically, right, probably significant laying off of staff. So Act 10 is absolutely on the chopping block. And look, the reality is we have a race for the next 2 years, 26 and 27, Bradley and the good Bradley, right, as we call her,
Right,
and
Rebecca.
and Ziegler are up. So now we're playing defense for the next 2 years, and 28 will be the next time we can flip the court. So, look, conservatives have to ask themselves this morning, do we want to continue to fight, preserve the reforms that we've fought so hard for the last 15 years, and new reforms, right? I already talked about eliminating the income tax. I mean, right there are still things we can do to make the state a lot better. Do we want to do that? Or frankly, do we want to go the way of Michigan? People forget Michigan had a conservative governor and legislature not that long ago. And now it's one of the more progressive states, Illinois, Minnesota, right? This is a question in front of Wisconsin conservatives. And, look, tons of people went out and knocked on doors. There's a lot of amazing conservatives out there. I was in the election integrity war room last night, hundreds of people out there volunteering, observing the election process. We still have a good infrastructure in place. But the people that are making the decisions on how we run these elections, they need to do a lot of soul searching right now.
I agree with that. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I do appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Jay.
Jake Curtis from the Institute for Reforming Government here, talking about the election results, the disappointing election results. 7:53 on WISN.